Welcome back to the Birdhouse Dynasty show. And tonight we've got a great show for you. We're brought to you by Choice Sports Cards, your number one choice in buying and selling sports cards. Check out Kyle and the boys over on Whatnot. Doing a great job over there. And tonight's show is about my top 5 drafts and fades in our rookie drafts. So, let's get right to it. Tonight, the first thing I'm going to get at is my top 5 guys that I was looking to draft late in our rookie drafts this year. So, I'm talking the guys that we're looking to acquire maybe late third, fourth round, or after the draft, maybe a fifth round if your drafts had those, depending on whether it was a 10 team or 12 team. We're looking at the guys ranked, let's say, after picks 35. All right. So the 5 guys I was looking at are, to start with, Luke McCaffrey, LMC, wide receiver that went to Washington. He was a wide receiver that only had 2 years at the position. Prior to that, he was a quarterback at Nebraska. But when he transferred to Rice, he switched positions. Now, Luke McCaffrey, or LMC, is, of course, Christian McCaffrey's brother. That means he also is Ed McCaffrey's son, who had quite the career as a Denver Bronco at the same position, wide receiver. And from watching his tape, I saw very much similarities to what his father looked like. Some of you out there may not have, maybe too young to have seen Ed McCaffrey play for the Broncos, but he was a very solid receiver with Denver. Played many seasons. He was a great contested catch receiver as well as a boundary receiver, sort of similar to what Jordy Nelson was for the Packers many seasons. And so I see a very similar build with Luke McCaffrey. Now, again, he's very raw at the position, but considering how raw he was, he did quite well, at least in his last season with Rice. He was very good at contested catches, and if he has any of those bloodlines or any of the competitiveness that his brother and father have, I think that he will, do everything he can to improve at the position, especially with his route running. So I think he's going to be, very dedicated to his craft. Jumps into the Washington wide receiver room, which isn't all that crowded, right? All they've got is Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, who, of course, disappointed many folks this past season. So there's a lot of opportunity there for him with new quarterback Jaden Daniels coming into the fold. We'll see how those two veterans mix in with Jaden Daniels. Jaden is, of course, a very good runner, so he'll look to take off, especially early on in his career. But we'll see how Luke McCaffrey gels with Jaden Daniels. He's 6'2", 198, great athleticism. He did run a 4.46 40. And so immediately he's just looking to battle with old veteran Jamison Crowder as the wide receiver 3 in Washington. So I was able to get a couple of shares of LMC myself, and I'm pretty excited about it, getting him in the fourth round. I figured it was a good dart throw. Both of those teams, I was pretty well set at running back. So figured, why not take a shot on the bloodlines here? So next up, I've got Spencer Rattler, who got scooped up by the New Orleans Saints in the fifth round. He's a quarterback out of South Carolina, was at Oklahoma before then, famously was benched in favor of Caleb Williams, who Lincoln Riley recruited while he was at Oklahoma. And Caleb Williams, of course, jumped in his freshman year, blew up, then followed Riley over to USC. But after that season, Spencer Rattler then left for South Carolina and sort of rejuvenated his career. Rattler was, of course, the number one quarterback prospect of his class. And so the talent is there, the arm talent especially. And by moving over to South Carolina, of course, in the SEC, he did see a lot tougher defenses in that conference than he had at Oklahoma. So there was a different game plan, different playbook there, more of a pro style playbook with South Carolina. So I think he developed himself better for the pro game by moving to South Carolina. And now he he's still, it's not like he was running for the Heisman or anything, um, but he had a great Senior Bowl, great combine, and now he gets a great situation in New Orleans where all he's got ahead of him is Derek Carr. I mean, he's battling Jake Hayner, uh, who was a fourth rounder last year, and um, I like the opportunity that Spencer Rattler has. I was able to get one share of him um, in these later rounds. I wasn't particularly targeting quarterback. I was more so looking at the running backs, especially uh, maybe a wide receiver or two. But I, so I did grab Rattler in one league, but he was definitely on my radar, especially ahead of one of the other quarterbacks that I will talk about later, who I faded. And next up, we've got Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue, who went in the fifth round to the New York Giants. And he jumps into a barren running back room there in New York. They acquired Devin Singletary via free agency. Of course, with Saquon Barkley leaving to Philadelphia, that opened up the room completely. It already had nothing behind Saquon. And so now there's basically Singletary, Tyrone Tracy, and a bunch of guys that couldn't get it done. So Tyrone Tracy has an interesting skill set. He tested very well at the combine athletically. Um, so this guy was 3 years at Iowa as a wide receiver in one of the worst passing offenses in college football. And then he transferred to Purdue, where he went back to his natural position at running back. He is 5'11, 210, so he has good size. And now he has a dual skill set. He could play all three downs. And so, he jumps in and he's basically the running back two there. And Devin Singletary, he isn't exactly a three down back. I know he's done some of that in Buffalo, then with the Texans last season, but it always in Buffalo, it was always like they were looking for to have somebody else. And then in Texas with the Houston Texans, he didn't get re-signed. The Texans went out and acquired Joe Mixon this offseason and let Singletary go elsewhere. So he wasn't important enough to them to re-sign him. Um, and so he goes to New York, where Singletary knows Brian Dable, the head coach from his days in Buffalo. Singletary has a good opportunity there for great volume, but anytime Singletary is hurt this season, you'll see plenty of Tyrone Tracy. He's a great flyer. I mean, early on in my rookie drafts, he was going late in the fourth rounds. Then he started to sneak up the boards a little. More savvy drafters were grabbing him in the third. I was able to grab 2 shares of him. So I like the prospects. I like the opportunity here for Tyrone Tracy. Moving along, next up, fourth guy I've got is Rasheen Ali out of Marshall, who went in the fifth round to the Baltimore Ravens. He's another running back I like, 5'11, 197. He's got a three down skill set. He looked great at the Senior Bowl until he tore his bicep. Now, this injury won't keep him out of camp. He should be ready to go at least by August, if not earlier. So I'm not too worried there. Now, he went to Baltimore, who, of course, acquired Derrick Henry this offseason, so he'll be the main guy. But behind him, you've got Keaton Mitchell, who's coming off a torn ACL. You've got Justice Hill, who's basically the same type of back as Keaton Mitchell. Rasheen Ali is a little bit bigger. He's not Derrick Henry, but he definitely, brings a different skill set than burners like Mitchell and Justice Hill. Um, so Baltimore, if King Henry were to miss any time this year, I could definitely see Rasheen Ali getting plenty of looks because neither Mitchell or Justice Hill are three down backs. So Rasheen Ali with a three down skill set, knows how to pass block. Um, I could see him getting decent opportunity. And of course, King Henry, I don't know that he's going to be there more than the 2-year contract that he got in Baltimore. After that, my fifth guy I've got is also another running back, guy with bloodlines as well, just like Luke McCaffrey. This is Frank Gore Jr. out of Southern Miss. He played all 4 years at Southern Miss, ran for over 4,000 yards, was a starter there all 4 years, 26 touchdowns. He's going to be a first and second down grinder slash goal line type back. He went to Buffalo, where the opportunity behind James Cook is definitely there. James Cook isn't exactly a goal line back. So between Ray Davis, who did get selected ahead of Frank Gore, Gore, of course, was an undrafted free agent that went to Buffalo. So he'll be battling Ray Davis there for looks in the Buffalo backfield to work the goal line, maybe take some goal line attempts away from Josh Allen if the Bills are looking to save him any. I mean, I don't know how many touchdowns Josh Allen has now, but it's a lot. And I don't know how much more pounding the guy can take. I mean, he is built like a machine, but still, if Buffalo wants him to play there 10 more years, they ought to look into maybe giving the ball to the running back once in a while when they're down on the 1 or 2 yard line. All right. So I do like Frank Gore as a good dart throw late. And I do want to give some honorable mention here for some deep league sickos out there that I know we've got watching. This guy is especially could be valuable to you in a league that awards a point for a tackle. This guy is named Sion Vaki. He's a running back slash defensive back that the Lions took in the 4th round. He profiles more as like a special teamer type, but of course uh, behind David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, there isn't much there in the Detroit running back room, so he could easily be the special teamer slash running back 3 type guy that will be, on the roster, sort of replace Craig Reynolds, essentially, who did get looks whenever Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs were hurt last season. So I could see this guy getting some sneaky value. Like I said, he did play mostly safety at Utah, so that is basically his natural position. So he could help the Lions out there as well. But again, I mostly see him as a special teamer. And again, if your league awards points for tackles, look to scoop him up for the bottom of your bench. All right. Now now I'm going to get into my fades. These are the guys I was just passing over altogether. And I'm going to start right up at the top at quarterback. I know most of you play on sleeper, and at the beginning, I don't think right now though, but at the beginning they had Jordan Travis ahead of Spencer Rattler. Now I don't know why, but I'm an FSU guy, but I'll tell you, I don't know that Jordan Travis is going to make it. All right. And I don't know what it is with FSU quarterbacks, but they just don't seem to cut it in the NFL. Now, they run a pro style system down there, but none of their guys have seemed to make it. Even Jameis Winston, you go back to EJ Manuel, first rounder in Buffalo, Christian Ponder, who the Vikings took a swing on in the first round. I remember that was a shocker of a pick. But I mean, you go back all the way to Charlie Ward, who of course decided to play basketball, and really the best FSU quarterback in the NFL is Brad Johnson, who barely even played behind Casey Weldon. So, I mean, FSU just hasn't developed quarterbacks to play in the NFL. Now, Jordan Travis, if I want to compare him to somebody that he looked like at FSU, I guess he plays sort of like Dak Prescott. He's a great leader, no doubt there. But his accuracy was questionable. Of course, he had great talent. I mean, his two main wide receivers this past year, Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, both got drafted. Uh, so, like with Wilson, he was able to sort of just throw it up there. The guy was 6'6", and Keon Coleman also was a great um, on ball catch, contested catch type receiver. So, his accuracy wasn't always there. He was able to move the chains decently. And again, he was a good leader, but now he goes to the Jets where he'll be able to sit behind Rodgers. They also have Tyrod Taylor there, though. So I don't know that Jordan Travis will be suiting up much this season. He should be fully recovered from that bad ankle injury that, of course, I'm not going to get into it, but left the Seminoles out of the college football playoffs. And so I just don't know that Jordan Travis actually will end up being the guy with the Jets in, say, 3 years. Okay. By then, I'm sure it's just the way the Jets roll. They will go after a veteran quarterback, in my opinion. Next up, my second fade is wide receiver Brendan Rice out of USC. He went in the seventh round to the Chargers. This one, I'm not buying the bloodlines. Brendan Rice, of course, is the son of the world's best receiver we've ever seen, Jerry Rice. Um, Now, he does go to a weak wide receiver room. Of course, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both went out of town this off season. And so literally there is, Lad McConkey, who the Chargers drafted early this year. And then you've got Josh Palmer, who's still there, and Quentin Johnston. So, it's not a whole lot to overcome there. It's just one, how often are the Chargers going to be passing under Harbaugh? And then two, he does have guys who are more talented than him ahead of him. Okay, he's not a he's not a burner. Um, he he benefited clearly from having Caleb Williams, the number one overall pick, throwing him the ball at USC. He did have 12 touchdowns last season. There are some possibilities there for Brendan Rice. Um, it's not like Josh Palmer or Quentin Johnston are superstars. So, Quentin Johnston obviously struggled last season. And so we'll see. I mean, the opportunity is there. I just don't see it happening. All right. Next up, my third one to fade is running back Isaac Guerendo, who the Niners took in the fourth round. He was out of Louisville. Before that, he was in Wisconsin, behind a bunch of talented running backs. So he didn't get much opportunity. Went to Louisville. He just blew up at the combine. I mean, him running a 4.33 moved him up from undrafted status to being taken in the fourth round, with the Niners moving up to grab him. Now, the simple fact is he really wasn't that good of a running back. I mean, he wasn't the number one back at Louisville. And just because the guy has a good RAS score at the combine, I don't know that all of a sudden means he's a good football player. Simple as that. I mean, I think Cody Schrader, who the Niners grabbed later, I think he was undrafted. I think he's a better football player. So I would see honestly that Cody Schrader probably is a better scoop up late. Um, but Isaac Arendo went to many teams in my leagues earlier and was a fourth round dart throw, which is fine. I mean, the Niners have an awesome offense, great running game. I get it, they're just dart throws, but he was somebody that I was fading for sure. Next up, I got another guy the Niners took in the fourth round, and that was wide receiver Jacob Cowing from Arizona. Now, I loved Cowing's film. I don't think he's a bad player at all. This guy, if you watch him, I mean, he looks like, the kid at the Y that's just way better than everybody else, or, a Phi class who just obviously knows what he's doing, and everybody else is just standing there watching him. Cowing just blew up his last couple seasons at Arizona after a great start to his college career at UTEP. So this guy has numbers. The bad thing, he's 5'8", 165. So unless he's this year's Tank Dell, which is going to be tough behind Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey all getting targets, it's very hard to find the window. Like, you really have to squint to see Jacob Cowing becoming fantasy relevant. I mean, literally, the only way he becomes fantasy relevant is a season-ending injury to Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk. So, if you want to bet on that, go ahead. I'd rather throw my darts at running backs who just have to wait for a running back to get hurt, and then they get an opportunity to come in and play for 1 or 2 weeks even as starters. Okay. Jacob Cowing isn't somebody that's going to come in if Brandon Ayuk has a high ankle sprain and is out for 3 or 4 weeks. Cowing's not somebody that's going to come in and go nuts during that time frame. All right. Best ball, sure, throw a dart. If you've got Brock Purdy and you want a late round dart throw, I'm sure Cowing will be good for a couple of long touchdowns at some point during the season. Um, but they did add Ricky Pearsall earlier in the draft. Now these two will definitely be playing different wide receiver positions for the Niners. But again, it's just very hard to find the light at the end of the tunnel for Jacob Cowing, unfortunately. This is a guy I was really hoping for a good landing spot, and it just didn't happen. So I've been looking elsewhere, like I said, more so at running backs. And if you want to throw a late dart on a wide receiver, I would suggest Luke McCaffrey more so. All right. Last, I've got another wide receiver who didn't get a great landing spot, and that was Tez Walker, who went to the Baltimore Ravens. He was out of North Carolina, catching passes from Drake May. And so he wasn't terrible. I think he benefited from Drake May. Um, he did have a good 40 time. Now he goes to Baltimore, where Zay Flowers is obviously the number one wide receiver. You also have Mark Andrews there, who gets a ton of targets at the tight end position. And so it's very hard to see Tez Walker actually becoming fantasy relevant in a place like Baltimore. Again, he'd literally need to beat out Bateman as a wide receiver too, and then have an injury to Zay Flowers to become fantasy relevant. Okay. There's only so many pass attempts there in Baltimore. They did start throwing the ball more, all right, uh with Monken coming in as the offensive coordinator last season, and I expect that to continue this year. However, I just don't think that this means that Lamar Jackson ends up supporting, you know, 3 fantasy relevant receiver targets, because you have Zay Flowers and you have to count Mark Andrews targets in there as well. So plus Derrick Henry came in, so I don't know how much more they'll throw this year with Henry there. So again, just don't know if I see Tez Walker making it. And we got Maddie in the house. Any thoughts there, Matt, on my top 5 drafts and fades? Go ahead and shoot me your thoughts. Maybe you grabbed one or two of these guys that I faded and you want to let me have it. Go ahead, be my guest. But that's all I've really got for today. You know, leave your thoughts in the comments, whether you're totally against some of my fades or you're with me on some of these drafts, 2 draft guys late round. My late round strategy this year was really going after the running backs that were there, and then as well on waivers after the drafts. There were tons of guys that I liked. The 2 I mentioned, or 3 that I mentioned: Frank Gore, Rasheen Ali, uh, Tyron Tracy. Tracy, of course, started moving up the board, so he was not available on waivers at all. But I was definitely looking at running backs. To me, the late round running backs are especially viable because usually they just need one injury. If they beat out the guy who is the number 2, they just are one injury away from being fantasy relevant. All right. A late round wide receiver like Brendan Rice, okay, let's say in LA, he's the wide receiver 4. Okay. You have Lad McConkey, you have Quentin Johnston, and you have Josh Palmer. All right. One of those guys goes down, Brendan Rice slides in. That doesn't automatically make him fantasy relevant. Like he's not all of a sudden going to see 10 targets a game. All right. Even if it's for 3, 4 weeks that somebody has an injury, it doesn't mean that Brendan Rice is going to slide in and become a Pro Bowler. All right. Does it happen? Sure. We all know about Puka Nakua last year. All right. But Puka Nakuas don't come around every season. Right. Now, I know the NFL is going more towards the pass, but that's where you draft your regular receivers earlier, then scoop up the dart throws at the running back position, in my mind. But that's all I've got for you tonight. Thanks for joining. If you've got any questions for me, please leave a like. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And with that, I am out.